Hi, welcome everybody. I'm really happy to see many friendly faces here today, and thank you all for being here. This is the first of the 28th TIDF AGORA Talk series, and it is very special to us because it's 3 talks in one go. Before I begin, I would like to thank our sponsors and especially the municipality of Thessaloniki for offering us this lovely venue. We will begin with the presentation of the DOK Together think tank report. Then the IDA Executive Director, Dominic Asmal-Wilson, will give a short talk on IDA's advocacy for freedom of expression. And right after, we will have the pleasure to welcome Malin Huber, producer at Hair Film, Leonard Cortana, consultant and impact producer, inclusion program and strategic partnerships manager at DOK, and Celine Murat, Executive Director of the IDFA Bertha Fund, who will discuss what's fair when it comes to co-producing and why. So, let's start with the DOK Together think tank report. DOK Together initiative is a result of a casual discussion, the kind of which you have when you realize that the world around you is going utterly mad. The rest that happened until today was as an instinctive reaction to respond to an ever-growing need to build a support network to assist filmmakers which are working under perilous conditions or are displaced or without access to funds. So, with no further ado, I'm happy to introduce Nadja Tennstedt, Director of DOK Industry at DOK Leipzig, Angeliki Vergu, our own, Head of AGORA Thessaloniki Film Festival, Carmina Orozco Lopez, Industry Delegations and Special Programs Coordinator, also DOK Leipzig, and Jordi Viñalda, Coordinator at the International Coalition for Filmmakers at Risk, the ISFR. And they will explain everything what this is about. Thank you so much for being here.
So, hi everyone, welcome, and thank you for being here. I'm Angeliki Vergu. I head AGORA, and the industry department of the Thessaloniki International Documentary Festival. And this is Nadja Tennstedt, who leads the DOK industry at DOK Leipzig. We've known each other for years, like most people do in our industry. We have been partners for some time now. We are supporting filmmakers with networking awards. We are supporting them through promoting their films in our libraries. We exchange thoughts, ideas, intel, and basically sharing best practices. And the casual talk basically that Thanos was saying before happened during one industry breakfast spontaneous meeting at another festival in the summer of 2024, and we started having a conversation that kept coming back with the same question. What are we actually doing to support filmmakers working under conditions of risk? And what can we do as festival and markets organizers to better support them? So, as festivals and markets, we are in a very interesting position. We're connectors, we bring people together, we create spaces where projects find partners and filmmakers find their footing. But we're also reactive by nature to the changes in the world and subsequently to our industry. So we respond to what comes to us.
And what has been coming to us is more and more filmmakers in really difficult situations, displaced, in exile, working under political pressure. Of course, this has always been the case. Filmmakers have worked in impossible, dangerous situations under autocratic governments, in countries at war, in exile. Filmmakers from Syria, Afghanistan, Iran, Palestine, to just name a few. But I think that what we've been reacting to is the exponential increase of places where filmmaking means taking great risks, coinciding with the closure of the West. in DOK Leipzig, with the Russian war on Ukraine, we started to organize industry events, showcasing Ukraine talent, hosting filmmakers, showcases, workshops, and presentations that were led by the Documentary Association of Europe, and worked for the Arte Initiative Generation Ukraine, who presented a lot of projects in Leipzig. While these events and initiatives are great, we realized that we need to respond much more intentionally, in a more cohesive manner, and create support structures rather than our one-offs that we do as festivals, like here a little bit of help, there a little bit of help. It's important to form structures. And we really don't know how that's gonna look like. Just what is very important is that this, of course, didn't happen in a void. It wasn't just Angeliki and me chatting, oh yeah, we need to do something. Everybody in this room has been addressing with each other, with filmmakers at risk, the things that are going on, and it is because of that that we came to creating this initiative. Yes.
So in March 2025, we launched DOK Together, last March, as a joint initiative between our two festivals. The idea is not to create something entirely new, but to help connect what already exists, because there are already many initiatives, and to be honest about our gaps.
And so in October 2025, we hosted a think tank at DOK Leipzig with 60 people, filmmakers, producers, funders, lawyers, NGOs. There were 6 working groups and lots of conversations. It was very eye-opening and pretty humbling. What was really amazing to see is that lots is being done already by NGOs, by lawyers and other organizations in terms of supporting artists at risk. Still, it also is super clear, and we didn't need the think tank for that, that there is need for much, much more. So today is part of this ongoing process, thinking about how we will do it together. We want to share what came out of the conversations at the think tank and hear from you people in the room, many of which were at the think tank. So DOK Together is still very much being shaped, and we are really glad that you're here and take part in that. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Carmina and Jordi, who will talk about the think tank and about filmmakers at risk.
And before we move on, we will step away. We're going to also enjoy the report as part of the audience. We want to thank again everyone that is in this room that helped with the think tank or was at the think tank or shared their ideas. And we'll come back for the Q&A session, right? Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here today, and happy International Women's Day. I have to say that it's a particular pleasure today to share the stage with 3 brilliant women. I feel very honored. And thank you, of course, for caring about this bigger conversation that we're having here. Thank you, Angeliki, Thanos, Nadja, and Carmina, for all your work, for providing the space here today to continue the conversations we started having last year with so much urgency, solidarity, and care. It has obviously not become any less necessary in the dizzying months that have followed since. What exactly is a filmmaker at risk? This is the main question, perhaps, that we at the ICFR, the International Coalition for Filmmakers at Risk, have been trying to answer in the past 5+ years of our existence, in circumstances that constantly shift the definition of both filmmaker and risk. Instead of the general challenges inherent to a career in film, dwindling public funding, volatile marketplaces, worrisome tech developments, the types of risk that make up our humanitarian definition are informed by societal, political, and geopolitical developments that threaten artistic freedom, creative expression, and personal safety, in line with criteria used across the world of human rights advocacy, for example, by Free Muse here in Europe and Artists at Risk Connection in the US. I've put them here on the slide behind me, and I want to go over them real briefly to give you a more concrete idea of what we're talking about. Directly causal risk is the most tangible of these risk categories. It's a filmmaker who finds themselves persecuted, put on trial, imprisoned, or worse, because a malevolent regime or extremist group takes offense with their very filmmaking. This is, for example, why in Myanmar, documentary filmmaker Shin Dawe was sentenced to prison for using a camera drone for her new film, something that was deemed espionage by the military junta in charge. This is also, for example, why Chen Pin Lin and Jung Yoon Suk were sentenced to prison in China and South Korea, respectively, for documenting their fellow citizens' uprisings and protests against controversial government measures. This is why Hamburg-based Turkish film producer Çiğdem Mater is sentenced to 18 years in prison, right there on the other side of the Aegean in Turkey, for a documentary about peaceful civil protests against the Erdogan regime that she never even made to begin with. This is what we call directly causal risk. Circumstantial risk refers to larger political or geopolitical developments that threaten freedom of speech and artistic expression or human life in general. This is, of course, the situation for every single Palestinian filmmaker these days, where their personal and professional livelihood is constantly endangered by the assaults, the settler violence, and the military complex of Israel. This is why, for example, Abdallah Motan has now been in an Israeli prison in the West Bank for under so-called administrative detention, which is a euphemism for imprisonment without charge or due trial. Circumstantial risk is also the reality for every single Ukrainian film worker as Russia continues its warfare on their country and on their culture. It is the reality for every film worker in Iran now caught in the crossfires between their own violently oppressive regime and the war unleashed so recklessly by the US, Israel, and their allies. But what we have seen in Iran and Palestine in particular too is what we call associative risk, where the danger is not just the overall circumstances, but the added bonus of being a cultural worker, more or less, often with a more or less public profile. In the West Bank, the Palestinian co-directors of the internationally lauded film No Other Land have seen how all that international visibility actually led to an increase in violence from Israeli settlers and militia, a deeply worrying escalation where we would normally see regimes backing down in the face of so much international scrutiny and attention. Iran's Islamic regime has always targeted filmmakers in particular, as most of you know, not just because of their actual films, like in the case of Jafar Panahi, Mohammad Rasulov, Maria Moghadam, and Beitar Sanaya, to name but a few, but also because of their involvement in peaceful protests, civil disobedience, or any other form of criticism of the state. Similar things are happening right now in Georgia, where filmmakers like Georgi Mrevlishvili, as well as notable theater actors across the country, are being arrested and made an example during civil protest marches. It's an old trick from the oppressive regime's playbook, and one we are expecting to see or are already seeing in countries like Belarus, Hungary, Turkey, Morocco, Bangladesh, the Philippines, Venezuela, Cuba, the US, and the UK. Lastly, the trickiest kind of risk for us to navigate is the so-called unrelated risk, where the particular prosecution or government scrutiny on a film worker does not directly stem from their public profile or professional creative activities, but from their involvement in other matters, be it a political career, a problematic financial investment, or general misconduct deemed unlawful in the context of their country. It is very difficult to assess whether this is being used as a smoke and mirrors campaign by the government in question. For example, in our monitoring of India, filmmakers in India, we very regularly encounter arrests that are made under the allegation of drug possession, which often read as intimidation tactics towards a highly visible industry, often accused of excessive behavior to begin with. To read more about the filmmakers that I mentioned throughout this, I refer to you to the little QR behind me or to icfr.international. Finally, I want to address the other definition, namely, what is a filmmaker? which might seem to be a little bit of an open door in the context of a film festival like this one. But it is worth emphasizing that so many film careers do not walk the bumpy but still paved path that many filmmakers in the global north get to walk. In Afghanistan, for example, it can mean a 30-year career in national television before finding the window of opportunity as well as the courage to send an independently made documentary into the wider world. In Palestine, it can mean switching on your phone's camera to document what you fear might be lost forever, reaching social media whenever you find a strand of an internet connection, and suddenly seeing your videos end up winning an Emmy Award. In Myanmar, it can mean fleeing out of your country and knocking on the door of the Dokuathon initiative just across the border in Thailand to learn how to use a camera in the first place and how to edit on free editing software for whenever you make your way back to the community that you're from. As we at this organization and in my work have learned quite humbly over the years, it is not about IMDb profiles, it is not about festival selections, and it is not about award seasons. It is about the need to translate your lived experiences and your vision of the world to art, to film, to any medium that allows for your voice not to die in darkness. Thank you.
So, oh, sorry, it was so loud. So all of this was a preamble for us to share what we have done in the think tank and what you would find in the report. So why did we do a think tank at DOK Leipzig? After the launch in Thessaloniki, we confirmed that there is a need for support and an urgency to support filmmakers. As we just heard from Jordi, there is raising pressure on filmmakers globally, and we all know what the global context currently is. And we knew that we had to engage the broader industry. We knew we couldn't do this by ourselves, and we knew we had to put our heads together to think together and learn from each other's perspectives, experiences, and we also started by researching what is already been done. As it's been mentioned, there's so much out there already. We started talking with organizations who are mostly supporting filmmakers, artists and journalists at risk, because they have been doing it for longer. We also started talking to our partners, friends, collaborators, many of who are in this room. We then decided to do this think tank. Very early on, we realized that we had to have a goal for the think tank, and it was to identify the main challenges and needs and to explore possible next steps. For this, we had 60 people in small working groups so that they can focus on a specific challenge. And it was important for us to have cross-sector thinking, so we had people from different disciplines, different parts of the world. And some of these participants included filmmakers and producers, festivals, markets, NGOs, film associations, industry consultants, etc. So I'm going to briefly introduce to you the 6 tables that we had at the think tank. It's a quite lengthy report, so I cannot go into super detail, but this is a bit of a sneak peek, and then you will be more than welcome to sign up to receive the full report. Unfortunately, it's not ready yet. It was a long process of putting all of this together. We put it together based on the notes from note takers who were sitting at each table, so you really get an into every table's conversations. This was a long process, and it was very important for us to have a green light from the people whose this report might put them at risk, so we are still waiting for some green lights. That's why it's not ready. And without further ado, I will start by talking about the first table, which was film funding. We asked the participants from this table to look at it from a regional, national, and international perspective. We found out that their strict eligibility criteria and institutional policies often shape access to funds, and it is often exclusive, or filmmakers who have relocated are not included in this eligibility because they no longer qualify in their countries of residence, but then they come to, for example, Germany, France, and they are not able to compete with the filmmakers who are also applying for the same funds. It was also found that the terminology in these applications can be quite complicated. Sometimes it's in a new language, like, for example, in Greek, or in English, and this can be difficult for non-native English speakers. Another of the very important challenges that they spoke about was that oftentimes there is an implicit expectation that filmmakers define themselves through disadvantage or trauma, and they have to prove that they are at risk, even also through their work. And this often limits narratives to crisis and victimhood. It is important for the participants that artistic diversity is encouraged and creative autonomy so that they can explore diverse narratives. The participants also talked about key takeaways or ways to move forward, for example, through advocacy and meaningful exchange with policymakers, through alliances with cross-border collaboration between funds, and very important to acknowledge that conditions of risk are rapidly changing, and eligibility criteria should be flexible and not fixed lists of eligible countries or conditions. The next table we had was focusing on mapping of resources and information. As we mentioned already a couple times, there's so much out there. And oftentimes there isn't context-specific information, and filmmakers find it difficult to navigate through different platforms, overwhelming amount of information, and not really knowing which resources to trust, or which ones are relevant for their specific situations. It is also difficult for industry decision makers to know how to safely and appropriately support filmmakers, because there aren't any guides that tell industry people how to work on these topics. Some of the key takeaways of the discussions include sharing specific methodologies and strategies rather than fixed manuals, which could be more effective with individualized and flexible diverse circumstances. And also the shared responsibility of maintaining and updating these resources. It's such a big task, and we believe that if we coordinate efforts, we could make the information available for the ones who need it most. Going from short to long-term support, we recognize that emergency support is very important, like relocation, artistic residencies, emergency funds. However, oftentimes filmmakers find themselves in limbo situations once this short-term support is over, and particularly when they are struggling to access local networks and industry, especially with new languages and unfamiliar circumstances. Apart from immediate assistance, filmmakers need ways to rebuild their lives and their careers, especially after relocating. This comes with challenges like longer production times due to mental struggles and heavy administrative processes, and some of the some of the key takeaways that the participants at this table suggested was to integrate post-program support from the early stages of planning of programs, including, for example, legal assistance, long-term mentorships, and mental health support that would ensure that filmmakers not only are safe, but they also have a way to continue building their careers. Filmmakers often put themselves through a lot of risks just to make a film, and it's very important that they reach audiences. So in this table, we were focusing on making sure that filmmakers at risk are not only protected, but also visible and valued in the film industry. And some of the main challenges that they found was that there is a lack of market onboarding, entry points, to networks and to markets, and that there is a risk of information leaks via pitchings and industry catalogs when there is information, delicate information, either about the filmmakers or their projects that could put them at risk. One of the ideas that was discussed was that festivals could implement market sensitivity codes that also have rapid takedown protocols in case of something happens that would make filmmakers feel safer in some spaces. And another one is for film festivals to redirect some of their funds for small license fees. And funders and markets could also offer micro grants to help support regional distribution to make sure that the communities who need to be watching these films get to watch these films. It is also important to create more training opportunities for emerging filmmakers, especially when there is no film schools or not a lot of film education available in topics like production, safety, and digital distribution. Mobility is one of the main challenges, and it affects every other challenge. So we decided to make its own topic because we thought it would take too much time at each table to talk about this very big issue. That filmmakers in conflict zones or those awaiting for residencies have multiple layers of difficulty, including visa and travel restrictions, safety concerns, and high costs. And often this prevents them from participating in key events or opportunities. For example, some other challenges are migration policies that are rising the rejection of visa letters, and this disproportionately affects filmmakers from specific countries. There are very limited travel grants for industry events. And even when filmmakers relocate and have an asylum status or a refugee status, for example, in an EU country, they are unable to return to their countries if they wish to keep making films about their countries, because that would make them lose their residency, which is what is currently happening with a lot of Syrian filmmakers. Some of the key takeaways or suggestions would be to include visa training for festival staff so that they know exactly what should be included in an invitation letter. So, for example, exactly what the festival is covering in terms of travel and accommodation, and they could also learn about visa fee waivers. It is possible to obtain a visa fee waiver, and including the exact paragraph of the visa code in the invitation letter could improve the chances of a filmmaker getting a waiver. They also recommended to look into all already existing platforms and handbooks from the performing arts world. They have a lot of information already online, for example, in platforms like On the Move. And to generally advocate for broader mobility policies. And the final table was about fair international co-productions. These are essential especially for filmmakers who have very little access to funding. And this often leads to power imbalances and unfair partnerships. There are many barriers, like in the structural barriers within institutions that make it more difficult for filmmakers to enter co-production deals. Like the inability to account for informal or undocumented work, which is common in many countries, like cash payments, unpaid development, and work done prior to contracts. It often also happens that the film might originate in a country or is about a story in that country, but ends up being marked as a minority co-production based merely on their financial contributions. So this often leads to the feeling of losing the film's identity. For the participants, it was important to remember that co-productions are not just about money, but they're also about structures, ethics, relationships, which means that change needs to be both at institutional level and individual practices. So they recommend to shift toward creative equity models in which creative input is valued as much as financial contributions, that there is also an inclusion of risk assessment into the risk that the filmmakers, producers, co-producers, and protagonists go through in the making of these films, and balance that out when making contracts and partnerships. They also recommended that markets promote codes of conduct for fair co-productions and involve more learning tools, legal help, and contract reviews. And now, Jordi.
I was getting very comfortable listening to you. Thank you so much for all that, for that summary and that synthesizing of all the work. I would like to tell you a little bit more about the journey of the ICFR over the past 5 years, but what I would like to stress is that we are but one initiative. We are but one participant in the think tank and in the Doc Together initiative. We are but one ingredient in the overall recipe. So what I would like to share with you here is very openly also what we've been trying, what we've been learning, and what we're hoping for. The International Coalition for Filmmakers at Risk, or ICFR, or how we secretly prefer it these days, just Filmmakers at Risk, was founded in 2020 by 3 major European film institutions, ITFA, IFFR, and the European Film Academy, with a string of global strategic partners jumping enthusiastically on the bandwagon at that time. Our work so far has included assistance in evacuating film workers from Kabul, managing and distributing a €500,000 emergency fund for more than 600 Ukrainian film workers at risk, and most particularly rallying the global film industry in support of colleagues at acute and severe risk of prosecution, persecution, imprisonment, or worse. It has taken us a little while to clarify that we are not a film fund, which is what you always have to clarify to filmmakers who are always looking for the next film fund. And B, that we're also not an army of vigilantes who can drop out of the sky to do rescue missions, as much as I personally sometimes wish we could do that for a change of scenery sometimes. Instead, we advocate both visibly through online campaigns, press releases, public petitions, film festival presences, and invisibly, which is in fact the bulk of our work. We help film workers with legal aspects. We support them in applications to artist residencies worldwide. We provide them with emergency micro grants or connect them to other sources of emergency funding. And we lobby for them across our film industry network, like here today as a grateful participant in Doc Together. Most importantly, we try never to say no. However limited our means as a little NGO are, there's always a resource, there's always a recommendation, there's always a pathway that we can think of and provide a film worker with, a lifeline no matter how small. Shining as large a light as possible on the violation of a film worker's human rights is our main responsibility, because it is in the darkness of the world's indifference that malevolent regimes can do as they please. The good news is that a lot of people in the world actually care. You are but a subsection of that wonderful group of people. The challenge that we have is to get people to care continuously, indiscriminately, and impactfully. Would you mind pressing the next one for me? Thank you. Sorry, this is what I was just saying. I should have gone to this slide. I keep forgetting about the slides. What we've been learning. 5 years into our work, this last thing that I mentioned, the continuous caring, the impactful caring, has become our biggest challenge, one that every other human rights organization recognizes all too well: how to keep fighting the fight. As people, many of us have been confronted with exactly this in recent years, right? Either in the face of Israel's genocide on Palestine, with Russia's war on Ukraine, or even the COVID-19 pandemic. The right intentions are there, but the stamina to keep translating them to concrete actions and direct impact often wavers or fades out over time. And this is only human, right? We are not machine men with machine hearts and machine minds, as Charlie Chaplin said in The Great Dictator back in 1940. How I hope those words would be altogether irrelevant in 2026. The past 5 years have taught us much about the definition of filmmaker and risk, as I explained earlier. It has become a whole lot easier for us to assess the exact needs of film workers who reach out to us. Some need concrete financial support to relocate themselves and their loved ones, or to deal with medical emergencies or the essentials of living when their filmmaking has gotten them blacklisted or unhirable, or to fight their governments in court with proper legal representation. Others still have the relative freedom to leave their countries, at least temporarily, if only a foreign artist residency or talent development lab would host them for a few weeks or a few months, so they can work on their projects away from the constant surveillance and pressure in their home countries. Very often, filmmakers ask us quite modestly, and this touches me as a filmmaker as well, to just help them in getting their films seen around the world. Despite, or perhaps because of their circumstances, they insist on being treated like the filmmakers they are, and for the work that got them into that undeserved trouble to be seen by audiences far and wide. If not, what is the point of having risked so much to make their films? A little aside, we are currently seeing this, for example, with Kurdish filmmakers in Turkey, as the Erdogan regime has very recently begun a new particular crackdown on festivals and exhibitors to refrain from providing Kurdish films, stories, and voices with a platform. So any programmers or distributors out there who are interested, come talk to us, please, because I have a few wonderful Kurdish filmmakers lined up who would love to connect with you. The world at large, however, as we've seen, has only so much bandwidth. Sometimes there seems to be a kind of popularity contest between the crises we are facing or trying to respond to. Some crises escalate rapidly, intensely, in a highly mediatized fashion. Others are simmering in the background in much more persistently nefarious ways. It has been, for us, much more straightforward to get a large audience within the global film industry and beyond to express support for the fates of our colleagues in Ukraine, Palestine, even Iran. But the oxygen of support dwindles when the crisis in question is less widespread, like in South Korea, for example, less noticeable to the outside world, like Turkey, or more continuous and impenetrable, like Myanmar, like China. There is a danger in responding all too eagerly, too quickly, to one case or one crisis and not being able to transform that into a consistent effort from within your organization or even from within yourself. At the same time, there is a different danger in not responding at all, as that stops you from training the muscles and skills needed when matters of censorship and oppression eventually end up on your own doorstep or anywhere within your closer circle. A little over 5 years into our work at the ICFR, we have now recognized the biggest danger for us and fellow initiatives, that we will run out of steam before the oppressive powers of the world do so. And through all that, we have to bear in mind, no one thing will fix everything. That's bringing me to our hopes at this point. This is the main thing that the think tank in Leipzig last fall exemplified. So many of us are already driving down the road in multiple lanes at different speeds, but all headed towards the same destination. We share, therefore, also very strongly DOK Together's belief that this is the foundation we can build our hopes and our efforts on. We, at the ICFR, hope for more ambassadorship, more solidarity. We hope for institutions and individuals to find what is possible within their own means. What can they care about? What can they contribute to? Who can they care for and take under their wing? We hope that we can avoid being reckless with our energies, spinning wheels without effectively going anywhere. We hope our initiatives, our combined efforts, can be durable and sustainable, rather than losing out to what I have now personally dubbed pioneers burnout. As I said, the need for this kind of support is not going to go it's not going to go away anytime soon. So, we better brace ourselves for the long ride. We also hope very concretely that more and more parts of our global film industry are willing to crack their doors open a little farther than they have been so far. To allocate spaces for filmmakers at risk, not as an exception, but by default. Not limiting that room to any particular country or culture, but remaining ever adaptable, as you said, Carmina, with the state of the world. Not to put them in a category of their own, away from the rest of the industry, but to embed them fully in the fabric of our festivals, markets, symmetrical co-productions, and infrastructure. We also hope, really, that we can start preventing rather than always trying to solve. To train filmmakers in ways to protect themselves better, to safeguard their ideas and their footage, to weave a layer of protection around the people they work with and or include in their films. We hope that this will enable filmmakers to express themselves artistically with even greater effectiveness while minimizing the risk of being punished for doing so. Artistic freedom instead of self-censorship. And lastly, we hope to further weave and solidify the safety net together with you all, each of our individual efforts contributing to the sturdiness and the continuity of this web, no matter how big or small each individual contribution. As I said back in Leipzig too, there are more of us than we think. There we go. Look at how embedded we already are. And this is just a glimpse. This is just a selection of the initiatives we know about and are in direct contact with. The list is much longer and more diverse already, but we're also in need of being expanded and specified to enhance how effectively we address the needs of individual filmmakers in their respective parts of the world. We invite you all, I think I can say that on all our behalves, to let us know what is missing, to contribute to this map, to the weaving of this web, to care and to continue to do so in a way that is feasible for how much the world demands of all of us these days. Again, as always, nobody is free until all of us are free.
And all of this is what we've been talking about, what we've been discussing about ever since the launch of Doc Together, but to be honest, even from before. And during the think tank, we were also asking the participants to try to come up with some suggestions, ideas, ways to move forward that are practical and doable. And across all industry segments, everyone in this room and whoever is going to watch the recording, we invite you to reflect on the following suggestions and consider if there's any way that you could implement it in your context, in your structures, and what is possible. So, for example, to establish recognizable guiding information points that could point filmmakers to support programs, safe contacts, or relevant resources. For festivals to collaborate and regularly update visa guides that not only one for filmmakers so that they can better understand how to do the whole visa process, but also for the festival staff to understand what makes a successful invitation letter and what ways there are apart from just sending a letter to support the applications of these filmmakers. It is also important to provide mental health support. One example I can mention is that here at AGORA, I don't know if you know, but there is a decompression room, and you can also sign up for one-on-one meetings with a therapist. And this type of initiatives would be great to have them in across different platforms. There is also the suggestion to incorporate mentorships in which the mentors could accompany filmmakers at meetings, especially if they're traveling by themselves or without their producers, so that they can have a sense of safety, that this mentor could also protect them from entering partnerships that they maybe don't fully understand or agree. And this bringing a sense of safety and expanding their networks. The think tank showed that there's already a strong willingness to address these issues and to tackle them collectively. So at the same time, it is very clear that we cannot do this alone. So our next steps is to continue forging closer collaborations with institutions, with partners, and expand what we're already all doing, and organize further discussions, events. Thessaloniki and DOK Leipzig are also going to make space for filmmakers at risk in their existing programs, like Jordi said, what they are already doing, so that they are not being separated, but they're being seen within their spaces. And we're also going to explore routes of financing, because all of this requires a lot of effort from many moving parts. So that's what we will be doing as Doc Together in our next steps. And we really hope that everyone joins us in this collective effort. Thank you so much. You can, as I mentioned, the report is not quite out yet, but you can scan this QR code and register so that as soon as it's ready, we would email it directly to you. And we would like to open the floor if there's any questions or ideas, suggestions from the audience.
Is the QR code working from all the way back there? It seems very ambitious. We'll leave it up for longer, so you can come up afterwards as well.
Are there any questions or suggestions or ideas? Or maybe one thing that we can say is that as soon as we have the report, we want to translate it to more languages to be able to share it as much as possible, and for filmmakers that may not know English to be able to read it and get informed. Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's just a question, because the report is not mentioning specifically documentary filmmakers. I guess that it could apply also to festivals or markets who would like to join, who are belonging to the fiction world, or...
I mean, yes, filmmakers at risk are not only doing documentaries. This specific initiative is focusing on documentary filmmakers right now. But definitely many of the aspects of the report can be applied to fiction filmmakers as well.
And maybe in that light, it's also good to once more show this map, because this is also a combination of efforts for documentary filmmakers in particular, for fiction filmmakers, for crossovers. I was just discussing earlier with Dominic as well, we see at the ICFR, we see about a 50-50 spread between documentary and fiction filmmakers at risk.
Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Nadja. I'm a Syrian filmmaker. Well, I mean, thank you for your work. It's really great, and I heard about it before. But I have a question, I mean, regarding not filmmaker, but the character in our films. So most of the time, actually, they are on risk, they are activists, and they're doing something. So how can we also contact you for this, or no? I mean, in general,
this is
like...
for Jordi. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for that question. Yeah, and that is a situation we see very often, of course. So what we always try to do there is to join forces with other organizations that, for example, already have systems in place for activists at risk. Very often there are documentary films made about journalists, and then we try to partner up with organizations that focus on journalists at risk, of which there are multiple. So that's not. We know that as an organization that focuses just on the filmmakers, we do not have the clout, like the enough reach to also take on the responsibility for everybody in the wake of a filmmaker at risk, but we try to pair up with as many other initiatives as possible in a case like that to make sure that it's not just the filmmaker, but also the potential documentary subject or a collaborator or an interpreter or anyone who is involved in a project who is also at risk because of the project. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your question.
Anyone else? Okay, so then I think we can move on and give us a couple of minutes.
Yeah, just 1 minute break to get Dominic onto the stage, and
yes.
If we can have the chair as well, please.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.